Alrighty then, it is 12:05 in the morning. What it do, Buckaroos? Today I'm here for what I call my NFL Draft Challenge. Now, I am the kind of guy who every year I'll make a mock draft. When it comes to sports, I love management, the ideas of building teams and stuff, and scouting is a very important element of it. And I like to make my mock drafts just like everyone else. I sometimes pull influence from other mock drafts, but I try to make it more my own feel and my own fit to how I go about it. It depends on the year. Some years, what I see just seems so consistent that I'm like, yeah, it's probably going to happen. And other years, you judge based off what you personally think, and that's kind of how I went about it this year for the most part. So my NFL draft challenge is to get more picks correct in this year's NFL drafts per my prediction than I did last year. And looking back at last year, and I'm not going to count the number at which the player was picked. I'm only going to count getting the team correct because the philosophy of picking players per team is not even just based off value, it's also based off how good of a fit they are. So looking at last year's draft, I could definitely say that I was right about 8 players. And 8 is not a bad number. I was actually watching Bengals mock draft video where he was saying that sometimes he just likes to get at least 5 or 6 or just a decent amount to feel like, hey, you got a good idea of what could have happened. Um, so, anywho, looking back at what I predicted last year, and I wanted to look at last year as a mindset for how to go about this year. My goal this year is 10. And I actually know people who have gotten 15, 16 correct. Like we do a little challenge sometimes and submit some mock drafts. Now I do one with my friends, but I also know some guys who are competitive, and they get crazy amount right. They can get like 14, 15, all that. I've never had that. My max that I got I think was last year, and it was 8. So like Bryce Young with the Panthers, that was one I got correct. C.J. Stroud with the Texans, that was one I got correct. I was right about Will Anderson going third, but I thought he was going to go to the Cardinals, so I'm not counting that one. I was right about Anthony Richardson going to the Colts. I was wrong about the Seahawks. I thought they were taking Jalen Carter. They took Devin Witherspoon. I had the Lions originally staying at 6 and taking Jalen Carter. That did not happen. They traded down to 12. I was right about Tyree Wilson going to the Raiders. That makes 4 players I was correct about. I was right about Bijan Robinson. I was right about. Was I right about Darnell Wright? I actually no, I don't know if I remember now about Darnell Wright. Where did I originally have Darnell Wright going? Uh, no, I did have Darnell Wright. I just had him going pick 9. I didn't have him getting traded with the Eagles. So never mind. Hold on. So Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Tyree Wilson, Bijan. That's 5. Darnell Wright is 6. Peter Skoronski 7. I did not have the Lions trading down to 12 to get Gibbs. I did not have Luke Van Ness going to the Packers. I had them drafting Jackson Smith-Njigba, so I was wrong about that. Steelers, I was wrong. Uh, Jets, I was wrong. Commanders, I was wrong. Patriots, I was wrong. Lions getting Jack Campbell. I thought it was going to be Kalijah Kancey. I was wrong. Buccaneers, I was wrong. Seattle, I was wrong. Um, I thought they were going to get Jordan Addison. Chargers, I was wrong. I was right about Zay Flowers. I was wrong about the Bills and Dalton Kincaid. I thought they were getting an offensive lineman. I was right about the Cowboys getting Mozzie Smith. It's a random one I got right. So we got Mozzie Smith to the Cowboys. We had Zay Flowers to the Ravens. We have Peter Skoronski, Darnell Wright, Bijan, Tyree Wilson, Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young. So that's 9 picks actually that I got correct per pick. So this year, the goal is to get 10. Um, don't know how doable that is, but we're gonna see. So that's just a quick little 5 minute introduction to what I was saying. Uh, there's gonna be some random stuff that I'm doing in Madden. I'm just kind of screen talking over it. Uh, so you'll see random pauses. You'll see me going into random franchises, just looking at stuff I did, and be like, "Oh, that's cool," and then deleting it. So if you're wondering what that is, that's all that is. So let's talk about the NFL draft. There's 32 picks. I've really gone a couple different ideas, and I'll just kind of talk about them. But I'll give you the ultimate picks at the very very end, just in case you don't want to hear everything I gotta say. So pick one, Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams. Obviously, that just seems to be the most notorious pick at the moment. And I couldn't imagine you get rid of Justin Fields and take a quarterback you're not as sure about. So Caleb Williams we're sticking with. Commanders taking Jaden Daniels. That's still the ideal thought. The whole Cliff Kingsbury signing, it just seems to make sense. Like part of me wanted to say Drake May, but I think for what they're looking for and Dan Quinn's most recent experience with Dak Prescott, I do think they'll go the Jaden Daniels route over Drake May. Which, following so, we know Robert Kraft wants a quarterback. And part of me wouldn't blame the Patriots for trading down and maybe taking a fly on on Penix, because what I think would be an okay idea, and I'm not saying they do this, I'm still saying they take Drake May third, the Patriots. But I could see a world where they don't want to, they trade down, maybe they use their second round pick and more to go get a receiver, whether it be in this year's draft or Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins or somebody who's looking for a trade. I could see a world where that happens and then they draft Penix later in the draft. That is a world that I see. I don't see them taking McCarthy, and I don't really see them taking Bo Nix. That's my personal opinion. But I do think that they say, hey, Drake May is too good to pass on, and they take him at third. And speaking of too good to pass on, Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, it just seems such like kind of like a match made in heaven, you know? I'm not going to say anything on the lines of a next Larry Fitzgerald or anything like that, but that seems to be the receiver you can't miss on. And with the Cardinals not really having a receiver in general, I'm going to have to say they take Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, alternatively, with the Chargers being the next pick, I don't believe they take a receiver. I think with the Harbaugh philosophy of running an offense, I think they built through the offensive line, and a lot of teams that are successful now started off taking offensive linemen to make sure they could protect the quarterback, develop one. They didn't just draft the best QB and it all work out every time. You know what I mean? Like even the Bengals didn't really have a great offensive line, but Joe Burrow worked out. But then there's other teams where it's like, okay, you start steadily and you work your way up. Like I'm a Lions fan, for an example, and I can say something about Jared Goff is that Jared Goff's a good quarterback for sure, but you know the compliments to a good offensive line will always help. So I have the Chargers drafting Joe Alt. That's my personal opinion is that they'll take Joe Alt. Rashawn Slater will stick at right tackle. Joe Alt will be the rookie at left tackle, or vice versa. Giants, I have them taking Malik Neighbors. Whatever. I don't fully believe they take a quarterback in one with their pick in the first round. I definitely think that they could take a quarterback in the second round and have him kind of develop a little bit because they're still got Daniel Jones on contract and they still have a veteran backup quarterback. I don't really see the need for drafting a quarterback at 6. At least if you get Malik Neighbors, you get yourself, a good target and, someone to put around, Darius Slayton, Wandell Robinson. Obviously, he's a rookie. Malik Neighbors is going to be a rookie, but the talent, I think, is very useful. And I think for a team that doesn't have a lot of skill position players right now, especially after losing Saquon Barkley and Darren Waller has had his fair share of injuries over time, I think a Malik Neighbors is a good pick. I also think that there's a chance that they could take someone like Brock Bowers, but I'm not too convinced that they would do that at 6. Speaking of teams that, need protection, the Titans, they fixed some of their needs at receiver. I know a lot of people who talk about the Titans still talk about the idea of them drafting a receiver. I don't see it. And obviously if they can't get Joe Alt, then the next best choice would be someone like J.C. Latham. Which, if we're talking about the whole idea of having an offensive lineman who fits a scheme, you could argue the Chargers should take Latham over Joe Alt. But I like the idea of Joe Alt for the Chargers for how they use Herbert, not just for the scheme of their offense. And that's why for the Titans, I have them taking J.C. Latham. I had the Falcons getting Dallas Turner, getting the best edge rusher available. Um, Definitely something that their team could use. They have some decent pieces on their team for sure, but I think I think the DB position's good enough for now. I think at the offense, bringing in Kirk Cousins, you got Bijan, you got Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and you brought in Rondell Moore from that trade from Desmond Ritter. I don't really necessarily feel like offense is the move. Offensive line is good enough for now. So Dallas Turner is my pick at 8. Now, for me, the hardest pick to make was pick 9. And the reason why pick 9 for me was so hard is because this was going to dictate the rest of how I make my decisions in the draft. Because this is the first draft spot that I could really see a trade happening. I don't really believe any team above the Bears is making a trade. I don't really see the Chargers trading out of 5, or the Giants trading out of 6, or the Titans, or the Falcons. The Bears are the real I could see them trading target. The Falcons could, but I don't think they will. The Bears have all the most reason to trade out of 9. It's the perfect, oh hey, if you want that quarterback before the Vikings, come get it area. Which is why I could imagine a world where maybe the Bears trade pick 9 to the Broncos, and maybe the Broncos take J.J. McCarthy or something like that. And then the Vikings get screwed over and have to do something different. There's totally a world where that happens. I'm just not convinced that that's what they're going to choose to do. I think the Bears are going to stay put at their pick, and originally I wanted to say they were going to take Tyrese Fuanga. Originally, that's what I was going to say. But then I backpedaled out and said on my mock draft that I have them taking Rome Odunze. And the reason is because even though they traded for Keenan Allen, even though they have DJ Moore, and even though that they have plenty of pieces in general to start building that offense, they have Tyler Scott now as well, Rome Odunze will be a rookie on a 5-year deal, and you'll still have him with DJ Moore by the time Keenan Allen is done on that team, whether he decides to stay or not. And I think that that's going to be a very important need for them. Offensive line for me originally was the go-to move because I thought, okay, you're getting a quarterback. Now why don't you go get an offensive lineman? So looking at their team right now, they have Darnell Wright at right tackle. You got Braxton Jones at left tackle. You have Tevin Jenkins. You have Nate Davis. I'm not entirely sure who their center is, but Tyrese Fuaga could definitely fit in there somewhere. But I think they could take a flyer on an offensive lineman later. I think they could use next year's draft capital because they should be a better team than they were last year. I think they can use next year's draft capital and one of their later picks in this year's draft and trade into the 3rd round and draft an offensive lineman then. Or even trade up into the 2nd round for that matter. I'm not entirely under the belief that they draft a tackle or an O-lineman in general at 9. Even though they very much could. I just don't think they will. So I have Rome Odunze going to the Bears at pick 9. I do have one trade in my mock draft, but it's a little bit later. Now we're going to look at the Jets, pick 10. I have them drafting Brock Bowers. I think Aaron Rodgers being healthy is going to result in utilizing more positions. I think Garrett Wilson's obviously a good receiver. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have the guys he wants to throw the ball to at receiver already, including Mike Williams. So I don't think they're going to choose receiver. And simultaneously, offensive line, which is still something they could very much use, I also think that they will choose the route to draft later and or trade up for again later as well. I don't think the Jets take offensive linemen now because the Aaron Rodgers getting injured thing was not a result of their O-line being bad. It was a turf problem. Because some teams, with the risk of your offensive line being bad, you prioritize drafting offensive linemen. The Jets, although not having the best offensive line in the league, I'm not convinced that they draft an offensive lineman. I'm convinced they get another player like Brock Bowers, who could block for Brees Hall runs and who could be used in the pass catch game, which can definitely help out Aaron Rodgers. So I got Brock Bowers going pick 10. And ultimately, that leaves the Vikings with the luxury to take the J.J. McCarthy they wanted. They don't have to trade up for him in this situation. I think at 11 they draft J.J. McCarthy. Then that leaves us with the Broncos at pick 12. And this is where I want to say I haven't seen anyone else make this choice. And this is fully based off of my own prediction. At least to my knowledge. I haven't seen any mock draft suggest this idea. I have the Denver Broncos at pick 12 drafting Quinion Mitchell. And that is because I'm not entirely convinced that a team that is rebuilding that isn't going to be good is going to pay Patrick Surtain the money he's worth. And I think that they might look to draft a corner in this year's draft, the best corner available, which would be Quinion Mitchell, and then look to eventually listen to trades for Patrick Surtain. That is my prediction. And I think they've gone corner before. They've taken a player that was just exciting and good before. I think Quinion Mitchell is the move they take. Mostly for that reason. And that leaves us with the next pick with the Raiders. Pick 13. I have them drafting Talius Fuanga. And that's because I'm looking at the Raiders' offensive line, and I'm thinking, yes, they could draft quarterback. Are they going to take a risk right now on Bo Nix, who is older? Well, last time there was an older quarterback who was pretty good, who was mobile, who could throw the ball. Now, granted, there was an injury to this player, but that was Hendon Hooker. He fell to the third round. Another player who kind of fit that modal was Malik Willis. Now, Malik Willis was also played at a smaller school, wasn't necessarily known for having the same art talent as Bo Nix does, and Michael Penix, but I could still see a world where Michael Penix and Bo Nix fall to the second round. In fact, not only do I see a world, that's my genuine prediction, is that neither of them are in the first round. I have 4 quarterbacks going in the first round, and it's not Bo Nix or Michael Penix. But I could totally understand if they do end up going there. But I have the Raiders drafting an offensive lineman, Talius Fuanga, because he can play tackle, he can play guard, and the Raiders do need that protection if they're going to let Gardner Minshew be a decent bridge quarterback. Because right now, and if they decide to draft a quarterback later, fine. They also have Aiden O'Connell if they want to use him too. They have options. I don't believe that quarterback is the choice they make. And speaking of offensive linemen, that brings me to the Saints. The next pick, I have them drafting Alamoye Fashanu. The reason why I have them drafting Fashanu is mostly because of fit. They lost a tackle recently. Trevor Penning might actually be better as an interior lineman. And I think playing him at tackle opposite of Ryan Ramczyk is just going to be better for the Saints offensive line. And I think that that's probably the direction they'll look, because trying to get tackle is not always that easy later in the draft. And I think they're going to try to do it sooner rather than later. And that means the next pick with the Colts at pick 15, I have them drafting Brian Thomas Jr. Now that's an idea that solely came from somebody else. That wasn't my own idea. But the reason why I think this one makes so much sense is they paid Michael Pittman Jr. They paid Jonathan Taylor. They paid a lot of skilled players already. They try to only maintain the players they have. They're not. If you look at the division that they're in right now, the Jags did so much to improve their roster. The Texans did a crap ton to improve their roster. Hell, even the Titans did a lot to improve their roster. The Colts did the most maintenance, just keeping what they could. They didn't really even get much new stuff. And I think when it comes to receiver, I don't believe, and this is Indiana sports in general, coming from someone who watches the Indiana Pacers, these teams in Indiana play a lot of whatchamacallit, it's keep your best players and keep rolling with the punches kind of thing. You don't really see them make a lot of crazy moves, and because of so, Brian Thomas Jr. getting the next best receiver on the board, who could potentially become a receiver too in that offense, is worth considering because it will give Anthony Richardson another weapon. It will also help the team in the long run because you'll have him for the next 5 years if you, assuming you accept his player option down the road and then he ends up being good. So I like that pick a lot. Now we'll go to the Seahawks. We have um, Troy Fontantu. That's just another offensive lineman. That's the opposite of Charles Cross. Um, Another team that's had a lot of injuries at O line. Just just need to get a guy who's a little bit more consistent, and then another guy in the first round who you can have under contract. I like that concept a lot, especially for the Seahawks. They've kind of been known for a while of not having a very good offensive line, so getting another guy who can still play between tackle and guard and or switch between tackles. Um, I know he's had some criticisms, but I do think that at that pick, that's the value you're getting. And opposite of that, well, actually no, that's two picks from now. I was about to mention the Bengals. I forgot about the Jags. The Jags at pick 17, I have them getting Terry and Arnold. I think getting a DB is going to be important for their defense. I know they have a decent amount of DBs. They have what is your name, buddy? Campbell. Tyson Campbell. Tyson Campbell's a good DB. Rashawn Jenkins had a decent year last year. What happened to Shaquille Griffin? Didn't they cut Shaquille Griffin? I know they need a corner. I know that much. He reminds me a little bit of Emmanuel Forbes, which to some people sounds cool body wise, and to other people sounds bad production wise. But Terry and Arnold, at that point, for what the Jags need, to me, is the best value pick. Now we get to the Bengals. Um, Who do we have the Bengals picking? I'm gonna have the Bengals get Armarius Mims. The idea of them getting a big tackle. I know they signed Trent Brown, and I know they have. Well, they cut Jonah Jackson, or just didn't sign Jonah Jackson. Either or, who cares? Oh, but they also have Orlando Brown though. Hmm. They do have both of those guys at tackle. But the only other reason why I still believe in the Armarius Mims pick is because that team has had kind of a revolving door at the offensive line. When they brought in La'el Collins, they moved him to guard at some point, and I think with Armarius Mims they could do the same thing. That big body inside for when they want to do their runs, and then having that protection. Because Armarius Mims, I don't know if he has the best footwork to play outside tackle, especially if you have Trent Brown and Orlando Brown. I don't think you put Armarius Mims at tackle. I think you bring him in to be a big body for the interior O line. I could imagine the Bengals trading down too, but that's not the trade I have just yet. Not, mm, no, that's not the trade I have yet. Yeah, we're not there just yet. All right, Rams. We have them taking Liatu Latu. Get the next best edge rusher on the board. You got Byron Young. You got a couple of other decent guys there. The other person who I think they could take though is Zershawn Newton to replace the production of Aaron Donald. I think that's kind of what you're hoping to get out of a guy out of Liatu Latu. But if they took Zershawn Newton, I wouldn't be shocked. Like for them, I'm between Liatu Latu and Zershawn Newton. But with Liatu Latu off the board, this is where I predict my first trade. I think the Steelers trade down to pick 25 with the Packers. I think the Packers trade up to pick 20 to try to get the next best defensive guy they can get. And I think they're going to trade up and draft Byron Murphy. That's my prediction. And the reason why I have the Packers doing that is because I have the Packers thinking last time they traded up for a young talent they believed in, it was Jordan Love. And not the last time, but the most successful, notable time in recency that I can think of that I can assure worked out was Jordan Love. Now, obviously, they had their picks with Quay Walker and they had their other stuff they did, but I think that Packers trade up to pick 20 with the Steelers. The Steelers will trade down to 25, and the Packers will draft Byron Murphy. With 21, I have the Dolphins replacing the loss of Christian Wilkins with Jershawn Newton. With 22, I have the Eagles staying put and drafting Nate Wiggins, putting him next to Darius Slay, Avonte Maddox, sliding him in there, helping out a team that wasn't really good at tackling. Now, Nate Wiggins necessarily isn't really known to be a great tackler either, but I do think with his speed and how the Eagles' placement of DBs, I do think he could fit in just fine. He's not the best corner, but I do think that Nate Wiggins will go before guys like Kool-Aid McKinstry and even a couple of other corners like Cooper DeJean. I don't think the Packers are drafting Cooper DeJean. I have the Vikings at 23 taking Chop Robinson. I had the Cowboys drafting Graham Barton. Now, the Chop Robinson pick was just because they lost Danielle Hunter. And I figured you get the next best edge rusher available at that point. You know, Byron Murphy's gone. Who else is gone at that point? Dallas Turner would be gone. So you take Chop Robinson, you get a guy who's aggressive, versatile, put him at the edge, and if you really need to, you put some of your slower guys for run stop at edge, you put him on the outside linebacker. I think the Vikings could utilize Chop Robinson in many ways. Cowboys, alternatively, Graham Barton. You could argue they get a no lineman after losing Tyron Smith. I don't have that here. I have them drafting Graham Barton specifically. Well, hold on. Let me rephrase what I just said. It's not that they wouldn't get a no lineman, but how am I trying to word what I'm saying here? Well, Graham Barton is no lineman. Sorry, I meant to say tackle. I'm just confusing myself. Yeah, Graham Barton can play a lot of guard, but he can also play the outside tackle. And can also make up for the loss of Tyler Biadasz to the Commanders. But at the same time, I think Graham Barton just can be utilized more than some of the other O-line, like Tyler Guyton, who would still be available. So that's why Graham Barton was my pick there. Now, speaking of Tyler Guyton, I have the Packers drafting Tyler Guyton after the loss of left tackle David Bakhtiari. I do think the Packers try to get another guy at O-line just to make sure that they have protection for Jordan Love and to make sure that their receivers still have time to get the ball. And Tyler Guyton, to my knowledge, would be the next best tackle available. I have the Bucks drafting Jared Versey. Versey. Another, at that point, I just think it's BPA. Go get a defensive player who can play a Todd Bowles type scheme. You know, a lot of blitzing, a lot of power rushing. I like the idea of him going there. And then the Cardinals, making sure that Kyler Murray doesn't get injured, I have them drafting Jackson Powers Johnson. They decided to cut DJ Humphries. They brought in Jonah Jackson. They signed a couple of other guys to the O-line. I think they get a young guy who could be a part of their future in the first round. So I have them drafting Jackson Powers Johnson. The Bills at pick 28, I have them drafting Adonai Mitchell. Obviously, they have Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. You've got some receiving options. You have your two tight ends in Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. You got a running back you can dish the ball to. But I do think they still need a receiver, especially one who will be on contract. Especially with how much negative they're taking in money. They cut Stephon Diggs, cut Jordan Poyer, cut Micah Hyde, cut Mitch Morse. They cut a lot of guys. There's a lot of positions that they could use at that point. That position could also be Kool-Aid McKinstry. Could also be an offensive lineman that I didn't think of being in the first round. I think they'll go receiver in the first round and address their defensive needs in the following rounds. That's my personal opinion. Now, as a Lions fan, pick 29 means a lot to me, especially because the draft's going to be in Detroit. And I'm going with what I want, and coincidentally relates to many mock drafts. Darius Robinson out of Missouri. Absolutely love the idea of that pick. A guy who could play on the edge, versatile enough to play on the line, like a linebacker. He's kind of like a James Houston, but bigger and faster and stronger, and exactly the type of modal the Lions would fall in love with if he's available at pick 29. Now, at pick 30, we have the Ravens drafting Kool-Aid McKinstry, getting another DB, making sure that their defense stays stabilized, of course, getting another defensive back out of Alabama specifically. We got the 49ers. The 49ers are an interesting one because once upon a time I thought they would probably be the team to take Tyler Guyton because they might need an offensive lineman too. You know, Trent Williams is getting up there in age. I'm not even sure who their right tackle is, to be honest with you. But I have them actually drafting Xavier Worthy, the receiver, mostly because I think when they decide, to pay Brock Purdy, obviously the whole idea of paying Brandon Ayuk may or may not happen. And also, the last time they said they may or may not pay a player, they just paid him, and that was Deebo Samuel. I don't know if they're going to have the same luxury with Brandon Ayuk. And if they do trade Brandon Ayuk, I don't know if it's going to be for a first round in this year's draft. It could be. I could also see them being kind of stubborn, trying to win a bunch of games, trying to convince him to just stay for the year and then franchise tagging him or something like that. So I'm not entirely convinced that they just trade him for a pick. I think that they would probably kind of play the long game, especially with Brandon Ayuk, who fits a modal that they don't have in this draft. And taking Xavier Worthy to be another target for Brock Purdy for now, I could see them doing that. And Xavier Worthy could be the safety net. Because if you decide to trade Brandon Ayuk for picks or whatever, you still have another receiver to plug into your receiving core, and then you go try to get another guy like Brandon Ayuk, which isn't Xavier Worthy, by the way. But, like, play models-wise, they're not the same. But I think fit-wise for how they run their offense, and if you need another speedy receiver, and Juwan Jennings has that big body to be in the situations where you put Brandon Ayuk. Now, obviously, I'm not saying Juwan Jennings is a receiver one who's going to win downfield all the time, but you can kind of use him the way you wanted to use Ayuk, which Ayuk was doing just fine. But if you're not going to pay him and you decide to trade him, we're playing that scenario with the 49ers here. So I have the 49ers drafting Xavier Worthy. That's how that pick was justified in my head. And with pick 32, I have the Chiefs drafting Cooper DeJean. I think after trading L'Jarius Sneed, Cooper DeJean can play corner or safety if need be, and I think you have a team that's already going to be financially struggling soon after paying Chris Jones and obviously reworking out Patrick Mahomes' contract. I just think the Chiefs, who are also going to have to pay their offensive line soon, have every reason to kind of draft a good maintenance player, a guy who at the end of the first round could fit in their defense. They're not going to have to worry about paying him for a while. He's just going to be a good stable defender. And that's why I have Cooper DeJean going pick 32. So there was a few other trade scenarios when I originally made this mock draft that I considered. I considered the idea of, like, what if the Chargers traded out of 5, traded traded down to, like, the Broncos, or if they traded, like, what if the Giants traded too? I thought was a high possibility, but I didn't really predict any of those trades in this mock draft. Same thing with the Bears. It's like it made a lot of sense for a team that doesn't have a lot of picks to trade out and maybe not draft Rome Odunze. But I had them pick Rome Odunze anyway, just because for the future, once Keenan Allen, who's getting up there in age, decides to go, you still have the contract luxury of Rome Odunze, and you have Rome Odunze and DJ Moore, who are still on the younger side. I mean, obviously Rome Odunze's young, but DJ Moore's not old. Keenan Allen's older, but if you decide to resign him, then you just have a full receiving core. So you can't really go to waste with that idea. The Broncos pick of Quinion Mitchell. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that name. Um, is probably a big stretch, to be honest with you. Assuming that Pat Surtain might be on the block at some point for a team that just isn't competing, and a lot of it's not even that they're not willing to pay the players. It just seems like a lot of good players are looking to either leave or not be a part of the association. Like Justin Simmons is gone, but I believe he got cut though. So in retrospect to Justin Simmons, it's not like he, to my knowledge, demanded a trade. But if Pat Surtain didn't want to be there, he'd get franchise tags, so he'd probably look for a trade if that's the case. And that's where I got to the assumption that, okay, maybe they just won't pay him. The Rams getting Zershawn Newton was. I also considered the idea of the Rams as drafting Zershawn Newton, and then the Bengals drafting somebody else instead of Amarius Mims. I considered a lot of ideas. This is ultimately what I went with, though. So, in case this video was long and you didn't want to know, hear all the explanations and all that, and you just wanted the quick run of the mock draft first round, this is my mock draft first round. Pick 1, Caleb Williams. Pick 2, Jaden Daniels. Pick 3, Patriots, Drake May. Pick 4, Cardinals, Marvin Harris Jr. Pick 5, Chargers, Joe Alt. Pick 6, Malik Neighbors, Giants. Pick 7, J.C. Latham, Titans. Pick 8, Dallas Turner, Falcons. Pick 9, Roma Dunze, Bears. Pick 10, Brock Bowers, Jets. Pick 11, J.J. McCarthy, Vikings. Pick 12, Quinion Mitchell, Broncos. Pick 13, Tyrese Fuanga, Raiders. Pick 14, Alamuya Fashanu, Saints. Pick 15, Brian Thomas Jr., Colts. Pick 16, Troy Fuantu to the Seahawks. Pick 17, Terrion Arnold to the Jags. Pick 18, Armarius Mim to the Bengals. Pick 19, Liatu Latu to the Rams. Still in my mind thinking maybe I should have said Zershawn Newton, but we're not fixing that. I said what I said. We're living with it. Pick 20, a trade up with the Packers with the Steelers. They draft Byron Murphy. Dolphins get Zershawn Newton. Eagles take Nate Wiggins over Kool-Aid McKinstry. Vikings get Chop Robinson. Cowboys get Graham Barton. They get the good guard there to replace the huge loss of Tyron Smith. The Packers with the pick they traded the Steelers. Steelers draft Tyler Guyton to play opposite of Broderick Jones. Bucks get Jared Verse. Cardinals get Jackson Power Johnson. Bills get Adonai Mitchell. Lions get my boy Darius Robinson, which, oh my God, I'm hoping they do. Look, as a Lions fan, the Lions can do anything. I trust Brad Holmes. I trust Dan Campbell. They know what they're doing. I trust them completely. I just really would like Darius Robinson, though. If they get an offensive lineman, can't hate it. Zach Rader. Sorry, not Zach Rader. Kevin Zeitler. Kevin Zeitler, great offensive lineman, absolutely amazing. But he's getting a bit older, He's not a long-term piece, so if you draft an offensive lineman for the future, can't hate it. You draft a defensive player, can't hate it. Draft a corner, can't hate it. Drafting a running back, I don't know why you would do that. I don't even think I predicted a single running back in the first round this year. Quarterback, I don't know why you would do that either. Just please, for the love of God, I'm just not feeling. I'm not feeling Noshawn Nealon. That's the one pick that I've seen in mock drafts I'm just not feeling. I don't know. I'm not feeling it. So I'm just really hoping that one pick does not happen. But anywho, so Darius Robinson was my pick. Pick 30, we got the Ravens getting Kool-Aid McKinstry. And then pick 31, we have the 49ers getting Xavier Worthy. And then pick 32, we have the Chiefs drafting Cooper Najee. And that was my 40. That was my 32 pick NFL mock draft with at least one trade. My goal is to try to get at least 10 of those picks right so I could beat my challenge from last year. Probably not going to happen. Getting 9 picks right last year for me was kind of goated. In terms of my success, that's the best I've ever done. I can't really imagine a world where I would do much better, to be honest with you. So, yeah, I might follow up with that challenge and see how I do later. But as of right now, that's it. there's nothing really else to say. Hopefully the draft tomorrow is exciting. Hopefully there's a lot more trades than what I predicted actually, because I only predicted one trade. But there's so many things that could happen. Honestly, um, we'll just have to wait and see. Well, this is a cool franchise here. Fun fact: this is the very first franchise I did at the beginning of the year. I did a what if Baker Mayfield led the um, Buccaneers to a Super Bowl franchise because I believed in Dave Canales working with Baker Mayfield. Not just like I believed in Baker Mayfield too. Don't get me wrong, but Dave Canales, I love him as a coach, and that's why him going to the Panthers I think is so important. I think even the garbage that the new Panthers owner has done to that team, I think Dave Canales can do some good maintenance control for sure. A little bit of good damage control. But anyway, I explained my picks. Those are my predictions. Yeah, if any comments come up, let me know. The draft is tomorrow, so we'll find out either how dumb I am or how maybe I came up kind of clutch with some of my ideas. But yeah, the most safe move I made was like the first four picks of the draft, and then the only real crazy, obnoxious, what the hell move I made was the Broncos drafting Quinion Mitchell, which even that, who knows, it could happen. But anyway, thanks for watching Buckaroos, and catch you later.